starting at noon, and I think this is a compromise between the two. First, thank you everyone for coming out in this frigid weather. It'll get better. Welcome, here we are again. If it's your first time, thank you for coming. So, as always, housekeeping first. Book Sandwiched In is a program of the Friends of the Library. If you haven't joined for 2026, you can see Hazel and Kristen at the back table there. It's the best deal in town, $5 for an individual membership, $10 for a family. It gets you into the book sale on the first day. Speaking of the book sale, thank you for everyone who buys there. I think I'm right in saying that the last sale generated about $35,000. 34. Someone else told me 35. It might have been Pauline. A little bit of inflation.
It was 35.
It was 35.
35. You're right. So we'll shoot for 36 next time. Anyway, they do that twice a year, and those funds largely come to the library for our operating budget. And it's an enormous help. There is all kinds of programming that we do that we would not be able to do without that support. Libraries throughout the Southern Tier are gearing up for Advocacy Day. There will be a busload of 55 people going to Albany on February 3rd. So if you'd love to have your picture taken with my I Love Libraries sign, I will do that. If you're shy but you still want to support, there are postcards at the end of the coffee bar there. If you could sign one of those and leave it here, we'll be delivering those to our legislators. I am happy to report that our legislators are very supportive of libraries. We rely on them to push back on the governor's library budget, which usually includes cuts to what we had the previous year. So it's important that we reach out to them and remind them how many people need the library, use the library, love the library. Help yourself to beverages and cookies. We will have a Q&A comment period after. We do need to stack the chairs again when we're finished today, so if you could just take your chair over there, we'll have somebody load them. Today's book is Kingmaker by Sonia Purnell. If you haven't read it and you're inspired to do so after our talk, the library has 4 print copies, including 1 large print version. And the ebook and audiobook are available through the Libby app. Today's presenter is Sky Moss. Sky is a graduate, a local guy, graduate of Beecher Elementary, Ernie Davis Middle School, Elmira Free Academy, the University of Rochester, and SUNY Cortland. He spent a quarter century in the collegiate classroom teaching the Middle East and Islam, Latin American history, modern Africa, contemporary world affairs, American history 1 and 2, comparative politics, and constitutional law.
Way back when.
We need some more of that these days. He's been married for 25 years to Rebecca Moss, and they have 3 children, Walker, Parker, and Sloan. This guy is an artist, an avid outdoorsman, lifelong athlete. His dad was from rural Georgia, and his mom grew up in rural Pennsylvania. He's a voracious daily reader, and lifelong learning is his greatest calling. Thanks for coming, Sky.
Thank you for having me. I can thank Jen O'Hara, who's not here, and I think she's been here before and spoke. She recommended me in the realm of history if you guys ever were reading a book that came up and you needed a speaker. So I was both surprised and a little bit delighted and a little bit frightened to take on this assignment. Book reviews aren't exactly my thing. I'm a historian by trade, a contemporary historian. I take great pride in that. I love to read globally. I love his story, certainly, but I love contemporary news as it relates to history. One of the classes I teach, Contemporary World Affairs, is really about processing the events of today, whether it's in Davos or Venezuela, relative to what's happened within the last 25, 50, 100 years, to create that connectivity. I think that's one of the things that I do best in the classroom. I was telling everyone that I'm associated with, I actually teach at Notre Dame High School in Elmira as well. I teach my college course there. So I teach African American history in the fall at Notre Dame High School, and I teach contemporary world affairs in the spring. And so I've made a number of beautiful friends through that connection. One of whom is Monica Phillips-Nix. Monica is this wonderful young woman who teaches ACE. She's retired, come back as principal, then took back over ACE. And she has a beautiful life arc like we all do, and hers includes time that she lived in Washington, D.C. With her husband when he was a young bureaucrat. They bought a house right in D.C., and she shared a hairdresser with Pamela Harriman. Pamela Harriman, isn't this a crazy life? I'm like, Monica, you are kidding me. She's like, no, Scott, we had the same hairdresser. I was like, so you met her? She's like, one day we actually sat for about 20 minutes and talked, and she said she was a remarkably beautiful woman. I said, I've heard that. I have certainly heard that. But the connection there was so arbitrary, but so real when I found out that I was doing this, that made me feel good, because Monica's my brother. So Kingmaker, Pamela Harriman's Astonishing Life of Power, Seduction, Intrigue, by Sonia Prideaux. I think she's done a number of famous biographies, one on Virginia Hall that has, I think, received the most acclaim. I knew a little bit about Pamela Harriman, but through the story I just told you, staying connected to politics, political parties, two-party system, etc., but I didn't know any of the details that I was about to discover. The sort of bottom subtitle there is mine, Power Knows Not Fidelity. And that's meant to be like quadruple entourage. Like there's so many places you can go with that, right? After having read this book. 437 pages later. So, Deo non fortuna, not through luck, but by God. There's the Digby family. In Minturn, in their home in England in the countryside, I found the family dynamic early on with Pansy and Kenneth to be really fascinating. He was averse to politics, though he associated with it closely enough to make some income, certainly. They considered themselves, I think, an apolitical family. They had very strong positive feelings about the Churchills. That was clear. And so I think Ken was pretty insistent on trying to shelter and keep his daughter away from that world. But if you read the book, and I'm assuming many of you did, he was also really focused on keeping her away from any sort of academic, formal education, etc. Because in England at this time, if you're going to marry properly, if you're going to go to your season and succeed, then you don't want to be too enriched with academic knowledge. Allegedly, that's a real turnoff in England at that time. So, I mean, all of that had a big bearing on Pamela's trajectory. But what I found, and I may return to this because it's really significant for me, like you don't lose your family center, your nucleus, like the core of who you are. Whether that's a genetic family or an extended family. And throughout, I thought it was really cool and fly how she kept putting ostriches on everything. Right? Like that Digby crest never left her. She put it on her plane. It was like Laverne from Laverne and Shirley. She put it on her shirt. She had it on her pins. She had special, like really expensive jewelry made in ostrich form. And I think at one point Nelson Mandela even gifts her something ostrich from South Africa. So that was so incumbent to who she was, even though she fought so hard in her early life seemingly to get away from it. It remained with her. So I started with Jane, who was Pam's aunt, who fascinated the world, was famous long before Pamela was. She married Edward Law, Lord Ellenborough, Baron Carl von Denigen, and you'll see divorce. She got divorced from a Greek wealthy man named Spiro Theotoki, and then eventually she marries the Bedouin sheik Najul El Masrab. She allegedly spoke 9 languages and was excellent on horseback, which seems to fit. Yes, Pamela loved riding horses. If I read that correctly, she read 5 miles. She wrote 5 miles the day before she died. Is that how you read that too? That really struck me. I'm like, because if she did have, they think she had a stroke, right? So if she did have a stroke, who knows how that was involved in just swimming laps the next day. I don't know, you theorize, but the horseback riding is a family thing. She was born into Anglican wealth. She later converted to Greek Orthodox when she married Spiro, and then Islam. She was buried and is buried in a Protestant cemetery in Damascus. Which I think is interesting too, because I definitely differentiate between Anglicans and sort of the Church of England and Protestantism. Like, those aren't the same for me at all. But I don't know. That's where she wound up. But she had a big impact on Pamela's thought process about escaping England and seeing a bigger world. Known as El Mezrab, in reference to her husband's people, the phrase directly translates to the spout, which in early Islamic reference is the reference to the Zamzam spring in the Kaaba in Mecca. There's a picture of Jane Digby El Mizrab. And if you remember, I think at the point where Pamela goes to Bavaria, they're stricken with fear that she'll be like her aunt. Because she's been through that territory at some point and left an impression on people. I was fascinated with the crest. And so when you read 437 pages, you're going to take something different, and you're going to take something different. So I just kind of processed myself as I went through the book. I was fascinated with the crest. The origins of the symbol date back to a century BC, and the Jugurthan War between the Romans and the Medians. The horseshoe celebrates the ostrich dominance, and is held upside down, traditionally unlucky, as this was the way luck falls out. This point ties to the Digby family motto, Dio non fortuna, as you saw, God and not fortune. And that's from the website Martin Person, it's the British site. And I just give you sort of a picture of the Digby family crest in statue. Like, that's what it is. Yeah, it's a little ghastly, but it's got character. Right? It's definitely got character. Oh, so just, again, free thinking as I'm working through putting this presentation together. She was restless in her youth. That was clear. She wanted to go to school, university. She wanted to go to London, right? She really got to go to London. She was kept in the countryside, and her parents were really averse to the scene in London, which was completely metropolitan compared to the bucolic world that her parents adored. And she lived in real opulence there too. When I was reading all the different servants she had, I mean, they had like 15 to 20 servants within their home. And they weren't, I say this snickering, they weren't incredibly rich, right? I mean, clearly they had money and they were titled, but you got the impression they were living to the extent of their means in order to maintain this, this very important sort of British culture image that she grew up in. I did think it also hilarious, and I kind of got it that their dad didn't like toilets. Like, he didn't have any bathrooms in the house. He thought they were gross. Bathrooms are gross, but the alternative is equally gross theoretically. Right? And so I kind of had to process all that, but I'm like, I'm not mad at Dad. I don't think bathrooms are that great either, necessarily. But yeah, so all the servants, London, which she gets to when she can. Minturn is her home, 1,500 acres. Right? A small estate compared to other members of the family, we're told. And then that Cern Abbas giant, which I don't know if y'all caught that reference. She was so curious because of her Aunt Jane and sex that she sought out any representation of it she could find, and the one closest to her home was the famed Saxon Cern Abbas that she would ride out on horseback to and visit. So she gets restless. She begs her parents to go to school. She goes for 1 year. I think like she's given a sort of a perfunctory degree in domestic something, right? We're told that she didn't take to math, she didn't take to the sciences, she didn't seem to have a complete fascination with standard academia. And so their entire goal, as I think was everyone, parents in that realm, is to get her married, right? And so they send her to get finished, to get polished. The belief at the time is that Paris will corrupt and France will corrupt young women, turn them into a woman not as desirable for marriage within English custom. And so Bavaria is where you go to find the polish that's necessary to get, the best husbands in England. So we're told she goes to Bavaria. It's there that you get this interesting story that she allegedly met Adolf Hitler. I think it's 35 or 36 or 37. In that realm, she was rather unimpressed in the meeting by her own account that she had. And future biographers as well as Pam haters. Pam's got a lot of haters. Yeah, Pam's got a lot of haters. They will question the validity of the Hitler story down the road. What also struck me, and there's a picture here in the next slide, is what's called the Gloriette. Much of this, I'm an American historian by training. All American historians took Western Civ 1 and 2, so we've been immersed in sort of European history to some degree. I used to work with a gentleman named Dr. Robert Cooper. He was a Europeanist. That's what he did. That was his thing. But for me, this is kind of tangential, to be honest with you. But a gloriette, I guess, is like a building off of a main castle that's more laid back that you hang out in. And I don't know if you remember the portion where Pam's kind of finding herself. She's hanging out with Clark Gable and other like really, really posh, famous people at a young age, maybe 18 years old, right? She's doing things that I'm promising you her parents don't know she's doing, right? Because she's caught up in this milieu within England at the time. It's very sort of partying. Is the impression I got, right? They're really partying. I was also struck by a story. She spends time in Australia. And so when you think about how modest her upbringing is by other English standards, this young woman's been to Australia, Bavaria, Canada, right? She crossed the ocean, got hit on by some creepy old guy in Canada early on in her life. And then I got stuck on the story where she's on the ship coming back from Australia, and the captain escorts the finest ladies across the deck each day. It becomes a very performance ceremonial display. Pam sees this, she's intrigued. She too wants to be escorted across the deck each day. So she approaches the captain and sort of asks for that. I think Purnell is intentional in constantly bringing up sort of the male-female dynamic as was witnessed, experienced, and processed by Pam her entire life. She observes power. She observes causality as it relates to power. I really believe that. So her season, which is just, I admit when I read it, I'm like, man, that's horrible. So you read 16, 17, and then you go through this ball circuit around London. And you're basically auditioning for wealthy men to choose you to become their wife. And Pam fails miserably. We're told a number of things. Allegedly she was too large. Allegedly she was too aggressive. Allegedly she was kind of snotty at times, right? Her season ends and she has not found a mate. And so to go to your second season is like the ultimate failure. So I'm like, that's horrible, right? There was something about that was so like defeating for me. She persists. I told you, you know this. She went to Canada where she met I think a prominent media personality within Canada. And that trip gets her featured in Tatler. What a better name for a British tabloid than Tatler. Like, how do you get in Tatler? I wonder if it's still around. I did not backstory that, because I ended up down a lot of rabbit holes with this book, certainly. But that feature in Tatler, I think, tantalizes a number of sort of connected people within London and beyond, and puts her name out there that did be named, which was pretty anonymous in most English circles at the time. The Joe Kennedy piece struck me. So she was friends with Kit Kennedy, who horrifically died in a plane crash. Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the family. What were your impressions of the depiction of Joe Kennedy in this book?
Seems like he was the Joe Kennedy I heard about.
Same Joe Kennedy? Yeah. I thought Purnell was pretty explicit in her descriptions of Joe Kennedy and how Kit would tell her friends, or I think it was actually John, would tell Kit's friends when they would come to spend the night, lock your door before you go to bed. Joe has a tendency of wandering around in your rooms at night. I mean, you get a lot of really colorful, specific references throughout the book, right, that I think are telling and purposeful. The Grand Duke Dmitri Pavlovich, if you remember, she was really flattered because of all her friends, he asked her to go to lunch. And so you get this progression of it, I guess, in her mind, and in reality, advancements through social status, through men of power, through men of wealth and power, as she progresses towards not even 20 years old, right? All this has happened, she's not even 20 years old. And then she meets a piece of work. Yeah, a total piece of work. That she meets Winston Churchill's son, Randolph. The descriptions you get of Randolph from the beginning have you saying, Pam, run. Run, 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 run. He's living off his dad's name from the moment he understands the power of his dad's name. We are told that he's a drunk, right? I think it's fair to say that that's what he is. He's an incessant drinker. And he has no real notions of sort of ethics and morality. If we can believe the author, and I am, he proposed to 9 women in 1 week. 9 women in 1 week, right? I want to know what the other 8 said. I'm guessing, I don't know, but he didn't love Pam. I don't even think he liked Pam. It's remarked that he thought she would bear children well. And in the Churchill family, the only objective ultimately is to perpetuate the Churchill name. And so she makes what I would consider a business decision. She gets pregnant at 19, and she gets a son. She has a son, obviously, but she also acquires, I don't know if I like that word, but I'm wrong with it, acquires a name that is going to be a portal for her to places, people, power, connectivity that otherwise I don't think she has. There's a picture of the Gloriette at Leeds Castle. That's where Lady Bailey entertained, and some pretty crazy stuff went on. Yeah, don't let the exterior austere look fool you, right? It's getting nuts up in there. So the Churchills were considered too political. This is Churchill and Chamberlain. I wanted to throw some pictures in there. It's clear that Kenneth understands, and I think actually they bought their Minturn from a Churchill at one point, right? Their family estate, I think, was purchased from the Churchill family at one point. I don't know why Kenneth doesn't care for him ultimately, but it's probably because he's as political as he is. I don't tend to see right-left centrist in Kenneth's opinion of the Churchills. I definitely see caution. And when she brings Randolph home, he gets drunk, surprise, and they're left sort of warning their daughter, Pansy in particular, really warning their daughter, you sure you really, really want to do this? I had an affinity. For Clementine too, Churchill's wife, but for Pansy as well, throughout the book. There's a picture of the wedding. Look at Pam's face. Yeah, she doesn't look real happy at all that day. We're told, this takes place during the bombing of London, that they're wearing gas masks as they go to the cathedral that day. Eventually that church is destroyed, I think a few years later. It's a decision that she makes that has so many ramifications long term, but there it is, a picture of Pam and Randolph. So what I've done is, again, I worked my way through the book, and then I did some profiles of the people that Pam encountered along the way. So there's Randolph's profile. As you remember, he was not like a model of health. He's going to die well before Pam. I think she dies in 97. Is that right? So at 29 years before. He was a womanizer. His parents, Winston loved the boy and kept, I think, holding out hope that he was going to turn that corner, pivot, become responsible, assume the name in a way that was reputable. Right? I really think that he really held on to that. He did. And Randolph didn't waste many opportunities to show him that you're wasting dead, you're wasting your time. Maybe I'm being a little hard on Randolph, but that's Purnell's perception, certainly. His World War II escapades embarrassed the family, and Pamela was already Pamelaing while he was in Europe and in Egypt. You get a story, and it's on that next bullet, yeah. The liaisons in this world really blew my mind. It's a microbial book. There's so much in there. But the liaisons are crazy. So she's already had an affair with Admiral Harriman. Harriman is one of the most powerful representatives in the United States who certainly has Roosevelt's ear. He's sent to Egypt on some business as it relates to the state, and there he meets Randolph Churchill, the husband of the woman that he's with back in London. And they just kind of play it off as if, hey, where do you want to go for lunch? And Randolph even writes back and says, what a charming man. But there's so much of that consistently through the book. At one point, the author describes a fat gut, boils, and a hideous presentation. Winston Jr. never abandoned his dad. He took his mom's charity and lived on his name and her money. That struck me too. Like, and I'm not gonna say Pamela. Pamela, from the time that Winston was born, wasn't mothered the way she was. I'll run it that way. Okay, there's no question about that. We're told that young Winston is sort of kept with au pairs and babysitters, etc., while Pam was saving England from fascism. Yes. That's how it reads, right? But I was struck the whole book how she obviously, she's his mother, she wants his love. She tries, I think, to perpetuate the love dynamic through gifts, through money, through awards, and there seems to be no level of humility around acceptance for Winston. But he never abandons his dad. He always speaks well of his dad. They keep a close relationship throughout his life. That was a complex sort of icky dynamic for me. Then I looked at Harry Hopkins, Admiral Harriman, and a previous. I came out of this book like I was an Ed Murrow fan. Really, I think I still am, but I can't look at him the same way any longer. I mean, that book definitely did that for me. So this phase of Pam Digby's life was the most consequential, long term. While it lasted only a few years, it put her in rooms, discussions, and beds with men who helped build her credentials. The power of the USA in 1940 is clearly communicated. So throughout the book, a couple that lived near the Digby estate, American prank is coveted and admired. When I have that cut in parentheses, if you remember, Pam describes a couple that live next door to Minturn that they go riding and hunting with. He's an American. He wears a top hat versus a derby, which is, I guess, what the Americans do when they go hunting in England. They wear top hats. And she's like, that was so American. I'm like, huh, who knew? His wife was an actress, but she had this admiration for them. So it's clear that everything American is really presented as ideal within Pam's world at an early age. The bombing of Britain lasted 56 days. Murrow's live coverage revolutionized broadcasting. You cannot take that away from the man. He was really a futurist relative to news presentation, live news, on so many levels. I credit him there. The RAF, with radar, held the Luftwaffe off, my bad. Just a quick curious story there. The British have radar in this era. And so they're able to detect sorties that are incoming from the Germans and get planes into the air to combat that. And some interesting things also is the Germans were working on what's essentially stealth technology, radar avoidance aircraft, based upon, there were laminate planes and gliders that they were trying to reduce to zero radar signatures for aircraft that were discovered in Barnes by the OSS when Germany was entered, let's say. So, two-time Olympic bobsled gold medalist Bill Fisk was an American. He flew for the RAF during that time. It was illegal technically as an American to go fly with the British and fight because we were neutral. But there were a handful, probably 7 to 10 pilots who did. The most famous was Fisk. Anyone excited for the Winter Olympics? I love the Winter Olympics. I love the Olympics in general. And it's you can't create a bigger political theater than now for an Olympics, right? So much innuendo. So, a little bit about Harry Hopkins. Born in Sioux City, Iowa, Hopkins was apparently smitten with Pamela. An operation for stomach cancer nearly killed Hopkins, and doctors had given him months to live. That was in the summer of '39, right? So it was basically established he's not going to live very long. He lived in the White House with FDR. Like, he lives in the White House. I thought of Andrew Jackson immediately, who had odd people like his niece and her husband living in the White House. But Hopkins lives in the White House. Hopkins was married 3 times, died at 55. He ran point on the Lend-Lease initiative. Interestingly, this was when the Soviets first acquired USA ice-breaking ship technology. So this is how this guy's brain works. Just kind of wandering as I'm going through this. One of the Lend-Lease pieces of technology that's so significant was icebreaker ships that we loaned to the Soviets to keep the North Atlantic open. They reverse engineered those, and today have the most impressive fleet of ice-breaking ships in the world. Our Navy currently has 4, only one of which is operational. I find it a little bit funny. I mean, not funny as in not funny, but just a little bit funny.
Ironic.
Yeah, we can throw it in that realm, right? So Hopkins posthumously faced random accusations of complicity in spying with Moscow. I think Senator Joseph McCarthy comes up one other time in this presentation, but after Hopkins passes, there are those who will publicly put out there that he might have been working with some Soviets. So Egbert Roscoe Murrow, full name, Ed Murrow. Born in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1908. His parents were poor Quakers. There was a disturbing story I uncovered about his father in Bullet 2 there. He went to jail for like 18 months or 13 months for getting a 13-year-old pregnant. They were Quakers, and they moved when his father got out to Washington, where Murrow attended Washington State College before it became Washington State University, so they went all the way out to the West Coast. His war correspondence made him famous. He was the face and voice of CBS News for 2 decades, and 54 challenged the honesty of Senator Joseph McCarthy. It's kind of his last huge act as a broadcaster, calling out McCarthy. He was completely devoured by Pamela, promised several times to leave his wife Janet. I felt bad for Janet in this book too. Murrow is obviously, he'll tell Pamela he's going to marry her, then he won't tell his wife he's leaving her, then he'll tell Pamela he can't leave his wife, then he'll tell his wife nothing. And that dynamic just went on and on and on. I got the impression that she would have married Murrow, I think. Who felt that way? Yeah, I got the impression she would have. I think there are relationships in this book, and there are sort of a love and engagement and connection in this book. I felt her and Murrow had something a little bit. And then William Averell Harriman. So PCH, she's known as the rest of her life, right? She's going to run that Churchill-Harriman name as hard as she can because it says something. She is both a Churchill and a Harriman. That is weight around the world, right? One man stood up to all of Europe to preserve democracy as it exists, and she was by his side, if you believe her, the entire time nearly, right? She carries that name with her, and then she marries Averell Harriman, 29 years, her senior. They first meet, as we learned, during the bombing of London when he's sent over to talk about what the Americans can do to aid in the war effort. He began his employment with Union Pacific Railroad Company in 1915. What I thought interesting about that bullet, if you shift down, you'll see he did a lot of business in banking with a German industrialist named Fritz Thyssen, who helped fund and rise of the Nazi Party in 1933 and 1934. Theismann was one of the primary investors and businessmen within steel, iron, a number of industries within Germany, and he had pretty close ties prior to the war. He's going to flee, I think in 1941, he flees Germany, ends up in like maybe Austria for a while, but eventually he is charged with minor crimes and complicity with the Nazis. Harriman was also married 3 times. There seems to be a theme here. A lot of multiple marriages. Kitty Lanier from 15 to 28. Mary Norton, who we learn a lot about in the book. We get the impression that their marriage is a bit frosty. Mary's in New York a lot of the time while Averell's traveling around the world. And then Pamela Digby from 71 to 86. It was almost a serendipity that when Pamela's husband Leland dies, that William's wife Marie died. I think at the same time, essentially. I'm getting towards the end. Stay with me. There's so many names. So many names. So Ali and Gianni. So like her aunt, Pamela searched for excitement, and new men took her south and east, right? So she's going to spend some time sort of traveling to different portions of the world. She bumps into the eccentric, wealthy, and connected Ali Khan. He was fantastically rich. He loved horses like Pam. They actually met for the first time at a party after a horse race in which one of his horses won. And proved to be a multiplier of her wiles. Yeah, I guess that's in the next bullet there. So Khan was a leader of the Mizrahi Shia, which is interesting. Mount Alamu, if you've heard of or familiar with, sort of the assassins, were a very, very, very real group. That's the Shia clan that he was leader of at that time. He goes on to marry Rita Hayworth. That I thought was interesting. I'm like, Then you get these kind of icky descriptions of the sexual techniques that he taught Pamela that she went on to utilize later in her life, including something that we're told is called the Egyptian wave. Purnell walks this line between really serious biographer intent upon, uncovering the mysteries of political science in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then just dives in the gutter, jumps right out. And that may be a little strong, but it's throughout the book.
Somebody told her it sells books.
They were right. That somebody was right. I often say, when I see all the remakes that Hollywood does, if you would just study history, you would have endless content. You cannot make up these stories. It's unplausible that she lived this life. It really is. Except that she did. Except that she absolutely did. Her real love, and I don't mean to diss him, was Gianni Agnelli. I think that's the one dude that she was really in love with. He was the heir to the Fiat Empire. Within Italy, you get this description of the first time he meets Pam. He pulls up on a motorboat, hair flowing in the Mediterranean wind. Pam swoons to the ground, runs off to Italy with him, and they spend the rest of their lives together. Right? He's at her funeral. And what's interesting to me, and I don't know, I did put it there, cocaine party. We're told how much cocaine this guy does, to the point that he might have like a platinum scepter. But somehow he outlives Pamela, right? Shows up at her funeral. He dies at age 81. I think his family today actually is tied or partial owners of the Ferrari empire, if I'm not mistaken. I think maybe his grandson is in there. But throughout the book, he was years. I think he bought Winston a plane. Maybe it was a car. Randolph. He bought Randolph a plane or a car. When she was married to Averill, towards the end of his life, he would show up and they would distract Averill for a few hours in the tea room while those two made acquaintance. But he was the one figure that kept appearing throughout the book. Then I shifted to America. So Pam had numerous contacts, and the sinew between the continents was extensive. Her political evolution coincided with the Korean, Vietnam, and Cold War. Her marriage to Leland Hayward exposed her to a theater crowd and the juxtaposition between arts and politics. Both venues draped heavily in drama, sex, and privilege. There's something foretelling that I'll get to at the end of this about Pamela Harriman's life, and you really get the strong feeling of that in terms of the disparate yet connected crowds that she ran in, right? They're different sorts of crowds, but there's a commonality there that I think really sort of manifests itself in a lot of stuff we're seeing today. Leland, too, was a drinker. His drink of choice was wild turkey. His kids saw Pamela as a hussy. I hadn't used that. I don't think I typed that word ever, maybe. Because of that, she had adversarial relationships with his kids. That really is going to play out. As you know, she basically goes bankrupt. She almost loses everything. Much of that has to do with inheritances, mismanagement of Averill's money, but also contentious relationships with the children of his exes. The Pamela look was real, and it propelled her into singular star couture. She ran a store in New York City for a short time. I don't know if you saw that. It's called the Pamela look. And she nails it. She has a look. There's no question about it. It evolves through time. It encompasses like different cultures, different cities, different places, but it is a distinct look from somebody who loves couture, loves fashion, loves getting dressed. Pamela Harriman had a look. Feminism comes up as a term quite a bit in the book. She backed Bella Abzug for New York State Senator, who ran against Daniel Moynihan, who she was not fond of. Moynihan had run his mouth while drinking a few times to a degree that Pamela did not appreciate. She was a contemporary and colleague of Gloria Steinem, Shirley Chisholm, and Betty Friedan. Pamela did not commit to political feminism per se. She was an ardent supporter of men and held a belief in gender roles that lasted a lifetime. She kind of flirts with more progressive women in terms of associations in her lifetime, and she certainly moves left further and further throughout her life. There's no question about that. But she also kept a distance from sort of the more mainstream feminist political culture. There's a complex irony in reality here. She craved legitimacy, respect, and power, and was largely relegated because she was a woman. Still, she seemed to embrace her most undeniable talents. Her titled upbringing and affiliation to Churchill helped. While she attempted to distance herself from the matriarchal expectations held by Mom Pansy, in the end she embodied some of that teaching. Like again, I mentioned this in terms of the Biggie pride. She kept, her dad was fond of rhododendrons, which are beautiful, which are real cool. But wherever she went, whatever new home or apartment she bought, she put an English garden right there. And she included in it numbers of rhododendrons, like reflective of her love of her childhood and her dad, etc. So she never lost that. Wives rightfully suspected and distrusted her. If she prized your husband, she got along with Clementine and Pansy and seemingly Janet Howard. And this story bothered me until she was not. I gotta ask what happened there. So Janet Howard was her right-hand woman. Like everything she needed done, Janet got it done. If you talk about the Pam PAC, which is this, she's one of the first PACs that's really formed in DC to raise money for different candidates. It's Janet that's running that PAC, day to day in reality. And then they have this falling out. This woman enters the story, her name is Linda Wachner. I read up on Wachner, her story's pretty curious too. And she basically abandoned Janet in favor of Linda. It destroyed their friendship. It was seemingly inseparable union that brought suggestions of an affair between Linda and Pamela. And regardless, it coincided with Janet's rude removal from her life. And so you get this real sort of sad, if you read Janet's eulogy, she lives longer. Her life was really accomplished too. And the way that their friendship ended bothered me. It really did bother me. So the Democratic National Committee, PAMPAC is what it came to be called. It reached predictive. Janet was the engineer, like I said. The Georgetown Mansion was the DNC think tank following the lambasting of that Reagan gave Carter in 1980. Carter got whooped, no question about it, like Dukakis whooped. She supported Carter, but claimed his outsider status made him expendable. Ironic, considering, right? She's an outsider. Yeah, but she really judges Carter as not fit for DC because of his outsider status. It should say her gatherings modernizations of her salon in London during the war. During the war, 49 Grosvenor Street was where she would bring in speakers, she would bring in acts, she would bring in musicians, artists, and then all the powerful people in the world would come there, sip drinks, and talk. And she would just absorb all of that. Hopefuls frequented the space, including Al Gore, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, and Bill Bradley, who gets dissed completely in this book. I'm like, wait a minute, I like Senator Bill Bradley. But she basically depicted him as really boring. Really boring, to the extent that he had no hope of ever becoming president. Her ability to mix hostessing, intrigue, fame, power, and reticent political discourse made it a space for Democratic Party dynamism. Georgetown, her home. Her proclivity to position herself as talent scout is the focus of the book. She seemingly backed winners, in retrospect. Now, mind you, she did back losers, too. Now, Clinton made an impression. She overlooked a tryst in her house, and who knows? I mean, Purnell is generous with sexual details, but undoubtedly she missed a few. There's a story of her basically catching Clinton in her house with another woman while he's married.
And while Hillary is in the house. Oh, wow.
I didn't get the impression she was in the house.
I was pretty sure she was there.
I don't think she was. I don't think she was. Yes, I read that page a couple times. Like, where's Hillary? But no, and she kind of overlooked that. Her panache was in no small way a byproduct of bougie British exposures, Parisian paramour days, Italian styling, and audacious protection of status. Like Pamela took everything she encountered, everything she did, turned it into a look, turned it into power, and she was real in that sense. Pamela, as it came to be known. I call this Pam being Pam. So Getty Images has, let's say, maybe 500 Pamela Harriman images under basically contract, right, that they bought up and warehoused. That's Robert Redford in the middle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a young Robert Redford in the middle. I didn't find many pictures of Pam with black people. We'll speak to that in a minute. I'm a black historian. I gotta bring it up. I did find one with Barry Gordy, which was interesting, in France. And that's Queen Elizabeth II's trip to D.C. I got 3 more slides. Stick with me. So just random observations, closing up. As a black historian, this was a telling read. Beyond general respect to Ron Brown, although she dismissed his presidential chops, that bothered me. She's meeting with Ron Brown. They're trying to figure out who has the ability, the talent, and the style to become the next president of the United States. He's standing there talking to you. For me, Ron Brown always had that talent. I feel like he always had that talent. Another died in a plane crash in Europe. But that never entered her mind that Ron Brown, who was the head of the DNC at the time, might be the one to think about. You get a few Vernon Jordan appearances in the book, and then this bizarre Marion Barry reference. She holds a fundraiser for Marion Barry. Who knows who Marion Barry is? Yeah. She holds a fundraiser for Marion Barry. And we're told that her butler removes all the valuables from her house. And Pam comes out and discovers she's done it and admonishes him and says, put those things back. Something about that page. I don't know. I think it was intended by Purnell, to show how egalitarian she was in a lot of ways. I don't know if we needed to make it in the book. Rich folks in England preferred fascism to communism and were not loudly opposed to Hitler. This appears early in the book. I think this is one of those things that has a reticence as I was reading, and as I'm living, that I really processed and thought about. Rich people in England and in the United States, I would argue, because Joe Kennedy was no fan of opposing Germany, right? They were more comfortable with fascism than communism. And then you get an appearance by Donald Trump. Actually, 3 appearances in the book by Donald Trump. The last was at Pamela's funeral, which we're told he shows up too late, and kind of a big show. His power predilection stuck out. The first time he appears, he's photobombing people. He's literally photobombing people. And if you believe the author, Pamela has no idea who she is. He gets next to Jackie Onassis Kennedy, he gets next to Pamela, gets in pics with both of them. And then the book is a looking glass, and this is a larger point I was thinking as I was trying to make, illuminating the intersection of politics, celebrity, power, sexual improprieties, and the insatiable sort of need of wealth. For me, her worlds, from the theater to Hollywood to politics to the couture world, all sort of have meshed into modernity. I think Reagan was probably the first candidate you saw kind of touched all those bars in terms of the life that he lived and the worlds that he traveled in. But I also think President Trump is a real reflection. And the fact that he appears in this book makes perfect sense to me. Pamela was where powerful people were always surrounded by them from all these different realms. So that stuck out to me. And then women as courtesans or feminazis, which is from page 369, referring to Hillary, who was also called Sister Frigidaire. There's another framework. Even Margaret Thatcher, who was married for 52 years, by the way, seems to puzzle the era, defy. I didn't know what to make of Pamela's impressions of Margaret Thatcher from the book, to be honest. And then I love cards. I was taught cards. I grew up playing cards. I learned math through cards. I learned strategy through cards. I learned lying through cards. I learned a lot of things playing cards my entire life. What's been beautiful this last year, they've told the students they can't bring their phones into the high schools anymore. So guess what the most popular thing to do in Notre Dame High School is now? Play cards. Everybody's got a deck of cards. Everybody's got a deck of cards. They're like, Mr. Moss, can you teach us rummy? I spent a week and a half teaching them fools rummy. I I got there eventually, but cards are back. So when I heard about this game, Bezique, because it calms Churchill, right? In the midst of a war that could destroy humanity as we know it, Pamela goes to his bedside constantly. And the thing that they do together, as they chop up politics, is play cards. In this game in particular, it's called Bezique. This game is based on tricks and melds. It's kind of a precursor to Pinochle. They both derive from the 19th century game Binacle. They all come from a card game called 66. The game is played with 1,000 points with a 64-card deck. So 2 decks are used with the 2 through 6 cards in each deck removed. The power order then descends from ace, 10, king, queen, jack, 9, 8, 7. Right? It functions off a trump. So if you played euchre, if you played horse and power, if you played any games that function off trump, hearts, spades. Anybody play spades in here? Let's go. It functions off the notion of trump. It arrived in England around 1860, but died out as Pinochle became popular. But it was wicked popular during that time. And so then I'm like, what's a meld? Because I play a lot of cards. I've never heard that term. I'm like, what's a meld? So in Bezique, a meld is when you put 2 cards together or more and they form a sequence that reminded me of poker. So my last slide is a Bezique meld scoring card. So a marriage is a king and queen of the same suit, except trump. You have a Bezique, which is the queen of spades and the jack of diamonds. Right? That's an interesting mashup that you have. You lay these down when you get them. When you go through the whole deck, you add up the points, first one to 1,000 wins the game. And this was the game that Churchill and Pamela played incessantly that brought him peace of mind. So I have taken up Bezique. Never too old to learn new things. That's all I have, guys. Thank you very much. I'll be open to any thoughts, questions, discussions, anything at all. Folks want to go.
I thought the most interesting part of the book to me was the end when she was the French ambassador.
I understand.
And she had so many contacts, I just wouldn't, and supposedly influence at that time. And I just wondered if that was all true.
Oh, I would say yes. I mean, I skipped over Ely Rothschild, right, who she met and spent a lot of time with. She was connected throughout Europe, certainly in Paris. I believe that her influence and insights helped Jacques Chirac ascend politically. I certainly believe that. And you don't make up the names of the famous people in Paris that came to the embassy all the time. I mean, curious to me too is sort of the criticism she gets from mostly Republicans when she's named ambassador to France. And it is a curiosity, right? That a woman born in England who really brought the Democratic Party back from the ashes is then named American ambassador to France. I mean, it's a really cool ending.
She got her due. I felt that she was finally known for her brains, maybe.
No, I don't disagree. I think those who knew her most intimately knew how intelligent she was every day, right? She was always learning and utilizing what she'd learned towards progressing herself, right? But then she also, like, beyond the power piece, she also had a real affinity for learning, right? So whether it was about wines, whether it was about parliamentary procedure, not as it was applicable necessarily to like societal or life gain, she had a curiosity. She was a learner, right? So yeah, I had.
So many thoughts. I didn't like the book.
Okay.
I liked Pamela Harriman a lot. I know the author gets kudos for being a good biographer.
Yes.
I think it read like a gossip writing. And I found that really irritating because she focused more on the sexual conquest rather than the true intellectual, what we were just talking about, intellectual power of that woman's mind and how much she cared about people, which is why she was so good at connecting them. But yes, well, the other thing that you didn't mention was she was set up by Churchill to sleep with all these people, to get information from them for Britain having a better edge in the war.
If this came across as an indictment of Pam's decision-making in life, that's not what was
No, it didn't
intended.
come
That's not
across
what that
as-
was,
it
not
didn't
what was
come across as
intended.
an indictment.
Yeah, I mean, Churchill knew, he was complicit.
No,
he understood.
He was beyond
Yeah.
complicit. I mean, he set her up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take agency away from Pamela,
No, not at all.
right?
No, she was
So-
willing because it was just so exciting.
And then that's where I guess I'll push back a little bit. Even though it was too tawdry at times, I don't feel like she ever lost her power as a decision maker
No, I don't
and,
think so.
and like
I don't think
the control of her life.
so.
Was it a little too much of that? Yeah, it was a little too much. But 437 pages, I couldn't hit on everything. But I didn't mean to disparage Pamela Harriman in any way.
I didn't.
Like I would, if she showed up here today, I'd go out and drink with her tonight.
I did not take you as disparaging.
I think some of that was to refute her existing reputation,
Right,
right? So she had to acknowledge it in order to tell the rest of the story.
fair, fair.
Yeah, and part of me too, because you, obviously in the book, and I forget the two authors who were doing competing biographies at the same time, both of them were pretty illicit and insulting in different ways. And so I felt like Purnell, she didn't run from her life, right? She didn't run from it. Did she spend too much time in those details? Potentially. But I still got a good feel for like the progression and development as a person. And the one thing I didn't mention that I agree with, she was magnetic. Not everyone's magnetic, right? Some people are brilliant, but not magnetic. I'm sorry.
You got me.
Go here, we'll go here.
Go ahead first.
Yeah, Clinton spoke at the funeral, and it said in the book that he spoke at the funeral in order to like silence the critics. It kind of touched on that. Do you know what he said, and what effect did that have, him speaking at a funeral?
There's a short bit of the transcript from that in the book. I didn't go back and read the entire speech. I think if you were an opponent of Pam Harriman, which many, frankly, Republicans were throughout that era because of some of the success she had in revitalizing the Democratic Party, it didn't matter what Clinton said. And you'd already made up your mind about Clinton. I mean, I think the fact that he was there, acknowledged the role she played in his ascension to the point that he got to in life, certainly validated, and all the people that were there, validated a crazy rich life lived, right? But I don't think Clinton's speech there is going to change the mind of Harriman detractors, who there were plenty of, like right after she died. Even.
I have this belief, and maybe a misgotten belief, that like my wife has had the same hairdresser. I'm going back to the hairdresser in the beginning. Forever, my mother did the same thing. I don't know if I'll read the book, but I would definitely like to hear all the hairdresser's stories. That to me was because of the work you did in putting in the cultural. I could just see that as a lovely story.
Yeah, I agree. And the book has plenty of pictures, and I love sort of the evolution of the aesthetic that is Pamela. But she's described in her youth is very different than she looks in her older years. Her hair specifically, right? It's tussles, it's red. It's very 80s towards the end of her life, right? You get that real 80s, but just an amazing woman. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
Yeah, a couple of things. For one, her wedding photo to Randolph Churchill, her hat kind of mimics the Queen Mother, who liked that sort of style, and so she appears to be a woman who was trying to find herself, and in those early years, she's looking at the Queen Mother. And also Randy, that family, Churchill's father was Randolph Churchill, Lord Randolph Churchill, and had a lot of issues with drink. And it's interesting how it goes down through the family, to Churchill, and then to Randy. And Churchill is the guy, he tries to redeem his father's name because he's disgraced.
Yeah, we're told that FDR sends Hopkins in Park to see if Churchill's sucking on the whiskey nibbles. I think it's the quote unquote from the book. So, yeah.
And so, you know, the word is that no, that Churchill was not, Winston Churchill was not a drunk. He liked to drink, but he didn't allow it to destroy him.
That's, from what I've read, yes. Yeah.
His intellect was incredible, and the game that they played, that physique, the fact that she could match him, playing that means that she had an intellect that he respected, because this guy was something else on his deathbed. He's recalling passages word for word that he read 60 years earlier.
Yeah.
You know, he was an incredible guy.
Yeah, he had a power brain, no question about it. And he lived a long time, considering, I don't know if he had the healthiest of lifestyles altogether.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember his funeral when I was a little kid.
Yeah, he considered that I do, but I've certainly read a bit about Church. Anything else?
Just a footnote, I just looked up Tatler, it's still published monthly.
Oh.
And it's the oldest magazine in England, it was started in 1707.
You just gave me a new goal. Just gave me a new goal. I gotta get it tatted somehow. Well, I hope you invite me back again if you ever do another historical book. I'd love to come. I might just come by and grab coffee and cookies at another point. Thank you.
Thanks so much, it was terrific. Okay, sign a postcard if you haven't done it, take your chair to the rack. See you next week.